And welcome to the Saturday edition of the Daily Space Weather Show. I'm your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, coming at you once again from the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. These are 24-hour videos of the closest star, and it's been fairly quiet. There was an M9 class flare in the past 24 hours, and there is a major CME impact on the way, expected to arrive late Sunday night into early Monday morning. We'll talk about it and lots more. And let's take a look at 131 angstroms now that we've showed you the 171. And that is just from today, May 4th, 2024. Let's see what's going on as far as volcanoes. We're going to truncate today's edition a little bit. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoy the content, why not get additional content? Like our Instagram account. If you've never checked it out, Instagram.com/Smash-O-Mash. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to press the subscribe button. Whether you're new or a seasoned viewer, don't forget to press like. Leave a comment. Press share. Visit our homepage. Visit the other links below the video and help increase the probability these content videos will continue to exist, remain publicly visible and free for all to view. And thanks for tuning in, by the way. These are what are erupting. As far as volcanoes, Ibu is exploding in a spectacular fashion. Luotobe less so, but still exploding. Semeru exploding. Ruang exploding. Kilauea looks like some stuff is happening somewhere in between the Halema-Uma'u lava lake and the Pu'u'o'o crater well down the slope. So someplace in between the top and the bottom, there may be some new eruptions fixing to happen there as lots of earthquake activity has occurred. Popocatépetl also exploding in central Mexico. Santiaguido and Fuego down in Guatemala. You've also got Sangay, the largest ash plume in the world right now from Sangay to 26,000 feet of altitude. Also Revenador and Sabancaya in Peru. 24,000-foot ash plume over Sabancaya. As far as quakes, no major quakes over the past 24 hours. There are the past 90 days from volcanodiscovery.com's convenient 90-day bar graph. These are the 5 and greater magnitude quakes of the past 24 hours. Papua New Guinea had one there. That was at depth. Over 170 kilometers estimated depth for that one. And then Vanuatu had one. A 5.3 at 163 kilometers. Some deep quake activity there near the Fiji Islands, like that 4.4 at over 500. Oh, wait a minute, did I miss one there? Oh yeah, a 5.8 north of Ascension Island, off of the West African coast. That was the largest quake of the past 24. I think that 5.8 magnitude event. Not in a particularly populated area of the world, however. Let's take a look at that just to check the location. How far from Ascension Island was it? Pretty far. Pretty far. Where even is it? Am I missing something? I don't see it anywhere near there. Anyway, moving right along to the radio flux, which is now at 167 solar flux units. So we've had a little uptick in sunspot number. A large sunspot has risen in the northeast. We'll get to it. However, it is an alpha class sunspot as far as we can tell so far. No complex magnetic fields. There are the past 1 year of data from Solon.info. Radio flux is the black line, which needs updating. It should be up to 167 in the coming 24 hours. And the red line is a sunspot number. And here is our space weather enthusiast dashboard, and you can see NOAA here now getting on board and agreeing with late tomorrow night, early into Monday morning, a geomagnetic storm. It could be as high as a KP7 or even a KP8. Could be a KP8 G4 class magnetic storm. So don't be surprised to see that. It all has to do with the strength and orientation of the magnetic field associated with that cloud of plasma. So anyway, that's where things are. CME impact coming. And you can see NOAA's Enlil spiral now agrees with ESA's a little bit more closely. Now, we're not expecting it to be a super dense plasma cloud. And here's ESA's Enlil spiral, just to show you that real quick. There you go. ESA is expecting it to remain below 40 protons per cubic centimeter there. So that is not a super strong hit. And more material will miss to the north than will strike Earth. So here are the past 4 hours, and things, again, they're back to pretty calm state right now. This 4-hour geospace magnetosphere movie depicts the magnetohydrodynamic pressure surrounding planet Earth. And again, like I said, things are chill as far as geomagnetic storm activity right now. Here's our ground magnetic perturbations map. We like to show it daily on the channel, just to show you that, hey, look, there's where the telluric currents are likely to be happening. This is where you're likely to be able to see the aurora, if there are aurora likely. Because this model is showing you a combination of ground-based magnetometers, space-based magnetometers, space-based proton counts, solar wind density, solar wind magnetic field and orientation. So all kinds of factors there. This depicts magnetic flux density at the ground level. Again, it will show you the likely places to see things like telluric currents. Geospace delta B, changes to Earth's B field. So yeah, KP1 is the current situation. It's chill in geospace. Looks like they may have recalibrated the ACE or something here. It's looking a lot more reasonable, as it's showing about 10 protons per cubic centimeter, a believable solar wind density at this point in time. So there we go. Look at that, the ACE calling out some normal numbers here. So the BTBZ is 6 nanotesla with a BZ of positive 1. Make that a BZ of 0 with a BT of 5 nanotesla. And look at that, an uptick in the solar wind density there, just coming through here in the past few minutes. Now up to 17.3 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind velocity here still quite low, under 400 kilometers a second at 369 kilometers per second. As far as the Discover, it's got a big block of missing data there, so let's just stick with the ACE for now. GOES magnetometers are smooth. We're seeing a tighter range here. We're seeing lower highs and higher lows than over the past 7 days, where we saw a little bit more wild gyrations there. Things are calm in the geospace. Next, the heliosphere magnetism. And you can expect Earth to remain in a North Pole-oriented sector here for several days, at least 3 days, I would say. Keep in mind the magnetic environment can change with basically no warning. But at the moment, Earth can expect to remain in a North Pole-oriented magnetic sector. Line of sight field plot indicating a little bit more stability over there on the east side, as you see the B field calming down after some pretty wild motions there. On the left side of your screen, you'll see that B field, those blue lines waving all around. But now things have chilled. The North Pole coronal holes have won the polarity battle. So here is our coronal hole line of sight plot. Once again, the B field depicted in blue, coronal holes, the solar polar fields depicted in green and red. Green for north and red for south. And that brings us to coronal holes. So let's cover it. Coronal holes here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. Just like sheep's bladders cannot be employed to prevent earthquakes, coronal holes cannot be employed to forecast earthquakes. Please note the pathetic statistical performance of this technique. And of course, there have been many statistical analyses done that disprove such hypotheses. However, people keep saying them over and over again as if it's some kind of a scientific fact. Nope. Coronal holes do not forecast earthquakes. Plenty of earthquakes happen without coronal holes, and plenty of coronal holes happen without earthquakes. So You should probably dispel all of those myths if you hear people saying that utter nonsense, because, well, I would appreciate it. I just have a very low tolerance for utter nonsense. Sunspot number is currently at about 165, maybe 164 is a sunspot number, something like that. The mid 160s is close enough for me. And our flare probability monitor and scoreboard is going to show 3663 and 3664 as the most likely places for large solar flares, and indeed that would be correct. So 3663 and 3664, with by far the most likely place to see a large flare remaining. Sunspot 3663 in the north central solar disk. Here they are from SDO. That's the magnetogram, and you can still see quite a bit of magnetic shear on both of those, but especially the northern sunspot group 3663. It has major magnetic shear. Strong magnetic fields very close to each other are what can be used to forecast solar flares. Yes, solar flares can be forecasted for decades. This isn't a mystery, it's just that there's not a great need to do so, or people would concern ourselves with it more closely. It's not that big of a deal if you have a minor radio blackout for a little while. It's not that big of a deal usually. There's our SDO continuum now that we've showed you the magnetogram. And we've got some pretty stable, healthy-looking sunspots here on the Earth side of the disk. That's what about 165 sunspots look like. And next we'll move on to energetic particles and solar flares. By the way, we hope you don't read sharticles. Oh, and before we do that, let's talk about some comments. So, of course, people are asking all the time about a channel called Suspicious Observers, and it's spelled with a zero. Suspicious Observers, because Ben has zero understanding of physics. But seriously, somebody asked, because I want to share this with our viewers, as you may not see all of our comments, obviously. Would you like, Adair Janny 7109 says, would you like to debate Suspicious Observers on the failing magnetic field that you claim isn't an issue? So without taking exception to the question itself, because the magnetic field isn't failing, nor has it ever in Earth's history that we know of, my response is, there's nothing to debate, in my opinion. The current, quote, pole shift, end quote, is absolutely irrelevant in geologic time period terms. Now, this is the most offensive part to me, is the cosmology nonsense. Keep in mind, folks, I nearly majored in cosmology in the mid-1990s. So the cosmology nonsense about a, quote, galactic current sheet, end quote, which is not a thing in this part of the galaxy, being some spooky cause of a, quote, solar micronova, end quote, which, by the way, isn't a thing either, since the term refers to white dwarf activity, and the sun isn't a white dwarf. So, but that's so idiotic that we need new terminology in the English language to accurately portray it. The author of the content, which is really nonsensical doomsday cult propaganda to sell subscription services, fiction disguised as textbooks, terribly thought out real estate, tickets to events, super chats, donations, free labor, etc., Ben Davidson is a plonker. The man clearly doesn't understand basic physics, astrophysics, cosmology, heliophysics, geophysics, geology, etc. Finally, old Ben would never, quote, give me a platform, end quote, because he is in strict opposition to the countless facts about space weather. You know, the ones portrayed on this channel. Nothing would make Ben less happy than hundreds of thousands of his subscribers recognizing the bamboozlery as snake oil, watching our content, and determining space weather isn't scary, and neither is the sun. It's essentially the source of all life on Earth. So there's a reason Ben never debates anybody, and my reasons are particularly unfortunate for Ben, as nearly every hypothesis he has is directly refuted by an endless array of facts. I stopped talking to Dim D, who interestingly keeps his viewers in the dark while babbling nonsense about the sun. I stopped taking him seriously when I raised concerns about his silly cosmology claims around 2019. That's when I realized he's in it for the fame and fortune, and Ben deserves neither because he's a charlatan, grifter, and cult leader. So, and certainly he's not into the truth about things like black mats in geologic strata, younger Dryas, pole shifts, heliophysics, etc. So thanks for asking, Adair Janny 7109, but that debate will never, ever happen. But it's hilarious that you've asked. Anyway, back to space weather stats. The proton flux is flatlined, so no spikes in it. The likelihood of a proton event is rising as that sunspot gets closer to the western limb, though. So we have a rising likelihood of SEPs, solar energetic particle events, which are what are portrayed in the GOES proton flux. As far as the X-ray flux goes, only a couple M-class intensifications. One of them was an M9 class solar flare happening at about 6:18 Universal Time this morning. So let's take a look at flares from one of our flare wavelengths that we like to show on the channel. There is our 94 angstroms wavelength. So there was a massive event back here as well. Sunspot 3654, actually, was responsible for a major CME there and probably a large flare event as well, but wasn't fully viewable from Earth. But yes, that large M-class flare did come from Sunspot 3663, as you may have come to expect. And we don't have any shocking close-ups today because, again, we wanted to shorten the video a little bit because, hey, it's Saturday night, and hopefully you're enjoying it. So, here is our solar system forecast. That is where things are today. There's the one-week forecast. We'll have a crescent waxing moon by the 11th of May. Here's what's going on over our head in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. As Venus sets, the sun chases, and Jupiter chases it across the ecliptic. The astronomy photo of the day is 3 auxiliary telescopes in the Atacama Desert in Chile. They're using interferometry to get clearer radio imagery at very high resolution in conjunction with another telescope. They've got an underground network of mirrors that do the interferometry, that adding images together and so on. So yeah, that's the astronomy photo of the day. And let's get on to CMEs. No imagery from the LASCO C2 and C3 since yesterday at 2300. So George Mason doesn't have it. Nobody's got it, including us. So yeah, that imagery ends at 1400 yesterday. Stereo A have it? Well, the answer is no. So yeah, no coronagraph imagery. The only thing we can really do is look at filaments and see if they've ejected. And I don't think they have, but we'll show you what we've got. And let's move on to our custom coronagraphs next. And we barely have any data there. So you will see some activity happening here. Is it earthly directed? The answer is probably not. We don't see any filament movements. We don't see any limb darkening. Now, sometimes a CME happens when there's no apparent filament. In fact, that happens regularly, usually around sunspots. But we don't really see any major indications of that. So now keep in mind, you can have a concentrated CME going right toward the imager, and it can be very deceptive and hard to see, but we're not really seeing any evidence of that. So we don't think there are any extra CMEs. But tomorrow night into Monday morning, there may be a fantastic stellar light show in the form of the Northern Lights. So fingers crossed for that. And let's get to our filament imagery. Here we've dropped one of the things that we usually cover, but there we go. There's Cerro Tololo, Chile. And the Charles Barkley filament there in the southwestern limb now is still intact. It is definitely large and definitely in charge, the way Chuck Barkley was taking the rebound title away from people like Dennis Rodman in like 1992 or something. I'm not sure if Barkley or Rodman most certainly won the rebound title in 1992. Drop us a line if I'm incorrect, but that filament, that's the Charles Barkley filament. And before we get the bonus features here, the past couple of hours from the GOES 16 SUVI, things are pretty chill. The most likely place for a large a large solar flare would be sunspot 3663 there in the northern hemisphere. Obviously, bonus features are next. No charging hazards. Electron flux remains low, but it's coming up off the floor. There's the 1-year chart of the electron flux. There's the forecast model. NOAA is expecting it to come up, and so are we. Next, the layer where it's measured, the ionosphere, which should be chillin' now, getting back to much more nominal readings. Less low-frequency anomalies should be showing up toward the end of this. So that is our ionosonde from Australian Government Bureau Meteorology. And there is the anomaly in megahertz from a 30-day median. Here's our global ionosphere nowcast. Total electron content and anomaly on the left, maximum usable frequency and anomaly on the right. And we close out our space weather videos with high-res images of the closest star. There's the continuum. There is the magnetogram. Significant magnetic shear continues up here. It's Beta Gamma Delta class. Very much Beta Gamma Delta class. That is a lit fuse as far as I'm concerned. Now keep in mind it can dissipate and not produce a flare, but if it remains in that kind of configuration, it will produce a flare. Probably a large one, and as it gets closer to the limits, it's becoming more and more likely to produce an X-class flare. That sunspot a lot less complex. It's Beta Gamma class. Is it Delta? Not really. Looks like Beta Gamma class. And as far as this new one up here, that is an Alpha class sunspot. But there is some material behind it, so I suspect it's being chased by additional sunspot groups, probably more complex ones, of at least Beta class orientation. Whoops, let's get to our meteorology segment. What is happening? I'm pressing the wrong buttons. I have hand fatigue. So, we've got low pressure running things in the north-central U.S. It's pulling in cold air from Canada as well as moist air from the south. So that is our mean sea level pressure map. Here come the rest of the meteorology segment. Surface winds of the eastern world, followed by jet streams, central world, surface winds, western world, jet streams, satellite image. Running a little late tonight. Let's speed things up. Here's our windy.com image. That's the Euro forecast for new snow for the next 3 days. There's the GFS forecast for new snow, Euro forecast for new snow, GFS forecast for new snow. Here's our weather.gov map. We've got some severe weather warnings in the Gulf states, also Oklahoma. There are the warnings. If your location is lit, weather.gov is where to get your warnings. Here comes some forecast. GFS 72-hour pressure and precipitation is first. Heavy snows coming to California. Also Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, etc. There's the map. There's the snowfall on the GFS in inches for the next 72 hours. And all the hot air in Colorado is not going to prevent snowfalls, especially on the western side of the Rockies. All the hot air in Colorado won't prevent it. And there's a lot of hot air there, for sure. Here's our total accumulated precip. And again, like we said yesterday, parts of California expecting like a foot of snow as ski season goes on and on. Texas going to get some heavy rains along with Oklahoma especially. Here's our wind forecast as we've got some wind on tap there for Nevada, Southern California, parts of Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, even Montana. Anyway, there it is. When you see those pressure lines bunching up, that air wants to reach static equilibrium, and winds are part of that process. Here's our temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius. And man, oh man, I can't seem to get done with this video today. So let's keep going. Next is lightning. And it's pretty minor over the US. We do have some slight cells happening there. There you go. There's your active lightning. We do have a string stretching from Milwaukee to Tulsa. Next, U.S. Doppler radar. We'll focus on the lower 48. There you go. There's the satellite imagery, and there is the water vapor map. It's a mixed bag of dry and moist air, and that'll be creating massive pressure gradients, and hence precipitation. So there you can see that string. It's a pretty narrow band there. There is the satellite map. Visible satellite is what we're showing. And there is the water vapor. It shows you the dry air, it shows you the moist air, and it clears things up when your Doppler is unclear. Anyway, I hope I've been clear. We'll see you next time here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. And until tomorrow, may that solar wind be at your back. Zzz.